Marie Antoinette, The Journey by Antonia Fraser. Picture this, a tiny, damp cell lit by a single, flickering candle. In the shadows, a woman lies on a rough canvas bed. Her hair has gone completely white, not from old age, but from grief so profound it's physically transformed her. Her hands, once adorned with the finest jewels in Europe, are now scraped raw from nervously pulling threads from the stone walls, desperate for anything to occupy her mind. Just outside, an entire city is baying for her blood. They're calling her a monster, a traitor, the Austrian she-wolf. In mere hours they'll come to bind her wrists, hack off her hair, and parade her through jeering crowds in a common wooden cart. How do you face that? How does someone born in the most spectacular palace on earth end up in its darkest dungeon, waiting for the guillotine? This isn't just about a queen, it's about a journey, from a golden cage in Vienna to the throne of France, and finally, to the scaffold's shadow. Today, we're exploring Antonia Fraser's masterpiece, Marie Antoinette, The Journey. This isn't just a dusty history lesson. It's a gripping exploration of a life buried under centuries of gossip, scandal, and lies. The book became a phenomenon, selling millions of copies and finally revealing the real woman behind the distorted caricature. By the end of our time together, you'll see Marie Antoinette not as some distant historical figure, but as a flesh-and-blood person whose story holds powerful truths for our own lives. You'll understand how reputations are built and destroyed. You'll witness how an unprepared girl was forced to become a woman of remarkable courage. And you'll discover the truth behind one of history's most famous tragedies. This is Marie Antoinette's journey. Our story starts not in France, but in Vienna's sprawling Hofburg Palace on a cold November day in 1755. Maria Theresa, Europe's most powerful woman, is in labor with her 15th child. Even as contractions rack her body, she's working, signing state documents from her bed. For an empress, duty never takes a break. That evening, a baby girl arrives. She's described as small, but completely healthy. They name her Maria Antonia Josepha Joanna, but the family will call her Antoine. From her very first breath, little Antoine's destiny isn't her own. She's a political asset, a chess piece on her mother's grand board of European power. Empress Maria Theresa is a master strategist who likes to say, "Others have to wage war to succeed, but you, fortunate Habsburg, marry." And Antoine, the youngest daughter, is destined for the most crucial marriage of all. For years, Austria and France have been bitter enemies. But now a new threat is rising: Prussia, under Frederick the Great. To counter this danger, diplomats engineer a radical alliance. Former enemies, Austria and France, will become partners. And how do you seal such a monumental deal? With a marriage between an Austrian archduchess and the heir to the French throne. Antoine's childhood is actually pretty idyllic. She grows up running through the magnificent gardens of Schönbrunn Palace and the more rustic retreat of Laxenburg, places filled with music, laughter, and family holidays. Her father, Emperor Francis Stephen, is kind and cheerful, genuinely devoted to his children. Her mother, the Empress, is another story, distant, formidable, intimidating. Antoine later admits she never loved her mother, only feared her. Maria Theresa is laser-focused on one thing: duty, and for her daughters, that duty is simple. As the Empress declares, they are born to obey and must learn to do so in good time. So Antoine is groomed to be the perfect, pliable bride for France. There's just one glaring problem. Her education has been terribly neglected. While she learns to dance beautifully and play the harp exquisitely, she can barely read or write properly in French or German by her early teens. This isn't just embarrassing, it's dangerous. She's being sent to the most sophisticated, intellectual, and judgmental court in Europe, and she's completely unprepared. In a last-minute panic, tutors are rushed in. A Parisian hairdresser, Monsieur Larsonneur, is imported to style her hair and tame her unfashionably high forehead. A French tutor, the Abbé de Vermond, is hired to polish her language skills and teach her the labyrinthine genealogy of the French court. But these are just cosmetic fixes. The girl at the center of it all is still just that, a girl. Playful, a bit lazy, eager to please, but with no real understanding of the world she's about to enter. In April 1770, at just 14 years old, her journey begins. The wedding happens first in Vienna. By proxy, her older brother literally stands in for the groom she's never met. Then comes the grand procession across Europe, a traveling court, with hundreds of people and thousands of horses. For weeks, she's paraded through towns and cities, hailed as a goddess of youth and beauty, the living symbol of a new era of peace. Then comes the moment of truth. On a small island in the middle of the Rhine River, they've built a temporary wooden pavilion. This island is neutral territory, the boundary between German lands and France. Here, the handover ceremony, the remise, will take place. This is where Archduchess Antoine will cease to exist, and Dauphine Marie Antoinette will be born. The ritual is as symbolic as it is brutal. Inside the pavilion, she's stripped of everything: her magnificent Austrian wedding clothes, her stockings, even her underwear. Every single thread connecting her to her old life is removed. For a moment, she stands naked and shivering before being dressed head to toe in French-made garments. Even her beloved pug Mops can't cross into France with her. She's now, officially, French property. As her carriage crosses the border, she weeps, terrified she'll never see her mother again. She's right. Her first stop in France is Strasbourg, where a young law student named Goethe watches the procession. He's shocked to see that the tapestries decorating the reception hall depict the gruesome story of Jason and Medea, a tale of a foreign princess, a disastrous marriage, and murdered children. He sees it as a terrible omen. Days later, in the forest of Compiègne, she finally meets him, her husband, the future King of France, Dauphin Louis Auguste. He's 15, heavily built, clumsy, painfully shy. He peers at her through short-sighted eyes and offers an awkward, formal embrace. He's nothing like the idealized portraits she's been sent. Alongside him are his three spinster aunts, Mesdames Adelaide, Victoire, and Sophie. From the very start, they nickname her l'Autrichienne, the Austrian woman. It's not affectionate. And then there's Versailles, the grandest, most magnificent palace in the world, but also a gilded prison, governed by etiquette so rigid and complex it's practically weaponized. Every moment of life, from waking to sleeping, is a public performance. The morning dressing ceremony, the lever, is attended by crowds of courtiers, each with specific rights to be there. As Marie Antoinette later writes to her mother, "I put on my rouge and wash my hands in front of the whole world." She's naturally graceful, well-suited for royal performance. But she quickly learns that at Versailles, every gesture is scrutinized, every friendship is a political statement, and every mistake becomes fodder for gossip. On her wedding night, the Archbishop of Reims blesses the marriage bed. The king himself hands his grandson his nightgown. The court watches as the young couple are formally put to bed together. The future of the Bourbon dynasty and the Franco-Austrian alliance rests on what happens next. Nothing happens. And for 7 long, agonizing years, nothing continues to happen. The marriage isn't consummated. The reasons are complicated. Louis is shy, probably suffers from a physical condition called phimosis that makes intimacy painful, and he's been raised by tutors who deeply distrust Austria and warn him against falling under his wife's influence. For Marie Antoinette, it's public humiliation. A queen's primary job is producing an heir. Each passing month is another failure, another reminder of her inadequacy. Her mother's letters from Vienna are relentless, filled with criticism and advice. Everything depends on the wife, if she is willing, sweet, and amusing. So what does a young, beautiful, unfulfilled queen do when trapped in a loveless, sexless marriage at Europe's most gossip-ridden court? She seeks distraction. She creates her own world. This is the period that defines Marie Antoinette's reputation for extravagance and frivolity. It doesn't come from malice, but from loneliness and boredom. She throws herself into fashion, making the couturier Rose Breton her minister of fashion. Her hairstyles become legendary, towering creations of powder and plumes. She loves late-night card games, gambling for high stakes, not for money, but for the thrill. Most famously, she retreats to the Petit Trianon, this small, elegant chateau in Versailles, grounds as a gift from the king. It's her escape, her sanctuary. Here, she can shed the suffocating etiquette of the main palace. She creates a romantic English-style garden, and later a picturesque model village, the Hameau, complete with a farmhouse, dairy, and windmill. It's her personal paradise, a fantasy of rustic simplicity, where she can play at being a simple country lady. In this private world, she forms her circle of friends, her société particulière. She craves the warm, informal affection missing from her childhood. She finds it first in the gentle Princess de Lamballe, and then, more intensely, in the beautiful, charming Yolande de Polignac. The Polignac family becomes her surrogate family, their children her delight, their company her solace. But at Versailles, friendship is never simple. The Queen's favor means immense wealth and power for her chosen few. Those excluded from her inner circle become bitter enemies. They see her private society not as a refuge, but as an exclusive clique, a symbol of Austrian arrogance and disregard for France's established nobility. During these years, the most famous myth about her is born. The story goes that when told the people had no bread, she replied, "Let them eat cake." But, as Antonia Fraser makes crystal clear, there's zero evidence she ever said this. The story had been told about other princesses for 100 years before she even arrived. It's a handy cliché, political propaganda that perfectly captures growing resentment against a court that seems dangerously out of touch with people's suffering. The real Marie Antoinette is quite different, known for impulsive acts of charity, once stopping her carriage for an hour to tend an injured peasant, even adopting a poor village boy whose mother had died. The truth, however, is no match for the narrative being woven around her. A torrent of obscene, vicious pamphlets called libelles begins circulating. They portray her as sexually insatiable, a lesbian, an adulteress, a traitor, sending French money to her brother in Austria. She's no longer just l'Autrichienne, she's becoming a scapegoat for all of France's problems. Then, in 1777, after 7 years of marriage, something changes. Emperor Joseph II, Marie Antoinette's older brother, visits France. In frank, man-to-man talks, he manages to explain to the two complete blunderers, as he calls them, what they need to do. The great work, as he puts it, is finally accomplished. The marriage is consummated. A year later, in December 1778, Marie Antoinette gives birth to her first child, a daughter named Marie Thérèse. And in October 1781, the moment all of France has been waiting for arrives. She gives birth to a son, the Dauphin, Louis Joseph. The king, with tears in his eyes, tells her, "Madame, you have fulfilled our wishes and those of France." For a brief moment, it seems the crown's flowers have finally bloomed for her. She's a mother, adored by her husband, and she's secured the dynasty. But even as she embraces this new role, a shadow is falling over France, a shadow that will soon eclipse all Versailles, light and splendor. The turning point, the moment from which there's no return, comes in 1785 with the diamond necklace affair. It's a scandal so bizarre, so convoluted, it could be a plot from one of the farces she loves watching. It begins with a necklace, not just any necklace, but the most magnificent diamond necklace in the world, featuring 647 flawless diamonds. Parisian jewelers Baumer and Bassange created it, hoping to sell it to Louis XV for his mistress, Madame du Barry. But the king dies before the purchase happens. For years, the jewelers try selling it, even offering it to Marie Antoinette. She repeatedly refuses. "We have more need of ships than diamonds," she famously says. Then a shadowy cast of characters enters the stage. There's Cardinal de Rohan, a high-ranking churchman from one of France's greatest families, desperate to win the Queen's favor after losing it years ago due to scandalous behavior as ambassador in Vienna. And there's Jean de la Motte, a cunning, ambitious adventuress claiming to be a descendant of the old Valois kings. Seeing the cardinal's desperation, Jeanne spins an audacious web of lies. She convinces him she's a secret confidant of the Queen. She tells him Marie Antoinette desperately wants the diamond necklace, but can't buy it openly because of the country's financial problems. Jeanne persuades the cardinal that if he acts as secret intermediary, buying the necklace on the Queen's behalf, he'll regain her favor. To seal the deal, she even stages a nighttime rendezvous in Versailles Gardens. A prostitute bearing a passing resemblance to the Queen is hired to meet the cardinal in the dark, hand him a rose, and whisper, "You may now hope that the past will be forgotten." The cardinal, blinded by ambition, falls for it completely. He buys the necklace for 1.6 million livres, promising to pay in installments. The jewelers hand it over, believing they've finally made their sale to the Queen. Jeanne de la Motte and her husband take the necklace, break it apart, and start selling loose diamonds in London. The scheme falls apart when the first payment comes due. The jewelers, not having been paid, write a strange, fawning letter to the Queen, congratulating her on acquiring the most beautiful set of diamonds in the world. Marie Antoinette is completely baffled. She reads the letter, assumes it's just another sales pitch from the persistent jewelers, and burns it. The truth finally emerges when Beaumer, panicked, confesses the whole story to one of the Queen's ladies. When Marie Antoinette is told, she's horrified and furious. The king, always chivalrous about his wife's honor, is equally enraged. He can't believe a prince of the church, a Rohan, could be so gullible. On August 15, 1785, the Feast of the Assumption, Cardinal de Rohan is summoned before the king and queen. Dressed in magnificent scarlet robes, ready to celebrate Mass, he's publicly confronted. The whole sordid story tumbles out. Convinced of Rohan's guilt, the king has him arrested in the Hall of Mirrors, in full view of the entire court. It's a catastrophic mistake. By making the affair public, the king turns a criminal swindle into a political circus. The cardinal chooses to be tried by the Parlement de Paris, a body openly hostile to the monarchy. The trial becomes a sensation. The public, already primed by years of pamphlets to believe the worst of the Queen, eagerly sides with the cardinal. They see him not as a fool, but as the innocent victim of a decadent, manipulative queen. Jeanne de la Motte becomes a folk heroine, the poor orphan of royal blood taking on the corrupt Austrian. In the end, Cardinal de Rohan is acquitted. The verdict is a stunning blow to the monarchy, seen as a direct repudiation of the Queen. The public celebrates Rohan's release as a victory for the people against court tyranny. Jeanne de la Motte is condemned to be flogged, branded, and imprisoned for life, but even she becomes a martyr in public imagination. Marie Antoinette is devastated. "If I, the Queen, have not found impartial judges," she weeps, "how would an ordinary woman hope for justice?" The affair permanently destroys her reputation. Slanders once confined to illicit pamphlets are now openly believed. The nickname Madame Deficit is pinned on her, as if her personal extravagance, not years of war and a broken tax system, is the sole cause of France's bankruptcy. She's now 30 years old. The light-hearted girl who arrived in France full of hope is gone. In her place is a woman beginning to understand the depth of hatred against her. The crown's flowers have withered. She's now beginning to feel its dreadful weight. As France spirals deeper into political and financial crisis, the Queen, for the first time, takes an active role in politics. Her husband, Louis XVI, is a good man, but he's indecisive, weak-willed, and prone to depression. As he falters, she finds a new sense of purpose. It's no longer about pleasure or distraction. It's about survival. about preserving the throne for her son. But her every move is viewed with suspicion. If she favors a minister, he's seen as a creature of the Austrian committee. If she opposes a measure, it's seen as foreign interference. As American observer Gouverneur Morris writes, "To know that she favors a measure is the certain means to frustrate its success. She's hated, humbled, and mortified." The breaking point comes in October 1789. The people of Paris are starving. On October 5th, a mob of thousands of women, armed with pikes, clubs, and even cannons, marches the 12 miles from Paris to Versailles to demand bread from the king. That night, the palace is invaded. The crowd, chanting for the queen's death, surges through the corridors. 2 of her bodyguards are killed, their heads paraded on pikes. Marie Antoinette, awakened moments before the mob breaks down her bedroom door, flees in her nightgown through a secret passage to the king's apartments. The next day, the royal family is forced to leave Versailles for good. They're escorted to Paris by the mob in what amounts to a funeral procession for the monarchy. Their new home is the Tuileries Palace, a dark, dilapidated building that hasn't been a royal residence for decades. They're now, in everything but name, prisoners. And yet, in this new, terrifying reality, something remarkable happens. The woman dismissed as frivolous and feather-brained finds a courage she never knew she possessed. The crisis forges a new bond between her and the king. She becomes his closest advisor, his source of strength. She begins secret correspondence with foreign powers, not to betray France, as her enemies claim, but to try and find a way to save the monarchy from itself. Her great hope is a dramatic escape. The plan is masterminded by her devoted admirer, the handsome Swedish Count Axel von Fersen. For months, they plot in secret. A large, durable traveling coach, a berline, is specially built. Disguises are prepared. The destination is the fortress of Montmédy, near the border, where loyal troops under the Marquis de Bouillé will be waiting. From there, the king hopes to renegotiate the constitution from a position of strength. On the night of June 20th, 1791, they make their move. The escape from the heavily guarded Tuileries is a masterpiece of nerve and timing. The royal children are disguised. The little Dauphin, dressed as a girl. One by one, the family slips out into darkness and meets Fersen, disguised as a coachman who drives them out of Paris. For a few hours it seems they've succeeded. As the berline rumbles through the French countryside, the king is jubilant. "Now that I have my backside in the saddle," he tells the royal governess, "I intend to be quite a different person." But a series of small delays, a broken harness, a misunderstanding with the military escort, throws their meticulous schedule into chaos. At the town of Saint-Menehould, the king, fatally, sticks his head out the window. He's recognized by the local postmaster, a fervent revolutionary named Drouet, who compares the face in the carriage to the portrait on an assignat, the new paper currency. Drouet rides ahead, taking a shortcut through the forest, and reaches the small town of Varennes just before the royal coach. He alerts local authorities and blocks the bridge with an overturned furniture wagon. When the berline arrives in Varennes late at night, there are no fresh horses waiting. The town is in darkness. As the royal party knocks on doors, searching in vain for their relay, the alarm sounds. The family is captured. The journey back to Paris is a slow 4-day agony. They're escorted by deputies from the National Assembly and surrounded by a hostile, jeering crowd. The mystique of royalty is shattered forever. When they arrive back at the Tuileries, it's no longer a palace, it's a prison. The failed escape seals their fate. For the radicals, it's proof of the king's treason. For the moderates, it makes a constitutional monarchy almost impossible to sustain. The queen, for her part, pins all her hopes on foreign intervention. She begins desperate, secret correspondence with her brother, Emperor Leopold of Austria, pleading for an armed congress of European powers to threaten the revolutionaries and restore the king's authority. But the world is changing. In April 1792, revolutionary France, in a surge of patriotic fervor, declares war on Austria. The Austrian woman is now, officially, the enemy. The final act begins on August 10, 1792. A massive, organized mob, backed by troops from Marseille, storms the Tuileries. The king's last line of defense is his loyal Swiss guards. In the ensuing battle, the palace becomes a slaughterhouse. Hundreds of the Swiss are massacred. The royal family, taking refuge with a legislative assembly, can only listen to the sounds of fighting. They spend the day huddled in a tiny, stifling reporter's box as the monarchy's future is debated. That evening, the monarchy is suspended. The family is transferred to their final prison, the medieval fortress of the Temple. Life in the Temple is a strange mixture of domestic routine and looming terror. The king teaches his son history. The queen teaches her daughter. They play games, read, walk in the small garden under constant watch. But the world outside is descending into madness. In September, Paris prisons are overrun by mobs, and more than 1,000 prisoners are massacred. One victim is the Princess de Lamballe. Her head is cut off, mounted on a pike, and paraded to the temple so her friend, the queen, can see it. Marie Antoinette, hearing the commotion, is spared the actual sight, but she's told what happened. She faints, and her daughter remembers hearing her mother weeping all through the night. On September 21st, the monarchy is officially abolished. France is declared a republic. Louis XVI is now simply Louis Capet. His trial for treason begins in December. On January 21st, 1793, Louis XVI is executed. Marie Antoinette, listening from her room in the tower, hears the drums roll, then the shouts of the crowd. She's now the widow Capet. For months, she lives on in profound grief. Her only solace are 2 children. But in July, her son, 8-year-old Louis Charles, is taken from her. The revolution, determined to re-educate the wolf cub, places him in the care of a coarse cobbler named Simon. It's the cruelest blow of all. On the night of August 1st, they come for her. She's transferred from the temple to the conciergerie, the grim prison, known as the antechamber to the guillotine. Her new title is Prisoner Number 280. Her trial begins on October 14th. It's a political show trial, not a legal proceeding. The charges are a grotesque mix of political treason and personal slander, recycling all the old lies from the pamphlets. She's accused of sending millions to Austria, of plotting massacres, of orchestrating all the crimes of the former regime. She answers with a calm, cold dignity that astonishes the courtroom. But the prosecution has one final monstrous card to play. They bring up testimony they coerced from her son. They accuse her of incest. For a moment, her composure breaks. She rises to her feet. "If I have not replied," she says, her voice filled with pain that cuts through the hostile courtroom, "it is because nature itself refuses to respond to such a charge laid against a mother." Then she turns to the crowd. "I appeal to all mothers who may be present." A shudder runs through the room. Even the market women who came to jeer are momentarily silenced. It's the trial's most powerful moment, a flash of raw, undeniable humanity. But it changes nothing. The verdict is predetermined. In the early hours of October 16th, she's found guilty and sentenced to death. Back in her cell, she's given pen and paper. She writes a last, long letter to her sister-in-law, Madame Elizabeth. It's a document of extraordinary strength and grace. She forgives her enemies. She begs her children never to seek revenge. "I have just been condemned," she writes, "not to a shameful death, that can only be for criminals, but in order to rejoin your brother." At 11 o'clock that morning, she's taken from her cell. Her hands are bound behind her back. Her white hair is roughly cut. She's placed in an open cart, the tumbril, and driven through Paris streets for over an hour. The painter Jacques-Louis David, watching from a window, sketches her on this final journey. A portrait of a proud, defiant woman, her face a mask of contempt. She climbs the scaffold steps lightly. She accidentally steps on the executioner's foot. "Monsieur," she says, "I beg your pardon. I did not do it on purpose." They're her last words. At noon, the guillotine blade falls. The executioner holds up the head of the woman who was once Queen of France. The crowd roars its approval. The journey is over. So what do we make of this story? After walking through the grand palaces and dark prisons of Marie Antoinette's life, what's the lasting lesson of her journey? It's tempting to see it as just a tragedy, a cautionary tale about power's dangers and fortune's fickleness, and it is that. But I think Antonia Fraser's incredible work shows us something deeper. It reveals that Marie Antoinette's life wasn't just a fall from grace. It was a profound, ultimately heroic transformation. The young girl who arrived in France was by any measure ordinary. She wasn't a great intellect, not a political genius, not a natural leader. She was a pleasant, good-natured, somewhat frivolous young woman who wanted to be happy. Her greatest fault was perhaps that in a world of calculation and intrigue, she followed her heart. She sought friendship, craved simple pleasures, and tried to build a small island of happiness for herself in the vast, cold ocean of Versailles. And for that, she was condemned. The image of the queen presented to the public, the monstrous, decadent, treacherous Austrian, was a political creation. It was a caricature designed to focus the anger and fear of a nation in crisis onto a single, visible target. She became a scapegoat. And what's so powerful about her story, what Fraser captures so brilliantly, is that Marie Antoinette the person was forced to confront Marie Antoinette the myth. In those final years, especially those final months, the frivolous girl was burned away. What remained was a woman of incredible steel, who found in her duties as wife and mother a strength she never knew she possessed. The courage she showed wasn't the absence of fear, it was mastery of it. She was terrified for her husband, her children, herself. We see it in her letters. But in public, she showed the world a face of unwavering dignity. Her life teaches us a timeless lesson about the gap between public perception and private reality. In our own age of social media, instant judgment, and online mobs, her story is a powerful reminder of how easily a person can be turned into a symbol, a caricature, and how quickly that caricature can take on a life of its own, with devastating consequences. But the most inspiring lesson is about the source of human strength. Stripped of her crown, her wealth, her friends, her husband, and finally her children, what did she have left? Only herself. Only her conscience, her faith, and her identity as a mother. And in the end, that proved to be enough. She walked to the scaffold not as a defeated queen, but as a woman who had found, in the depths of her suffering, an unbreakable sense of self. Her journey wasn't from a palace to a prison. It was a journey from being an object, a political pawn, a fashion symbol, a target of hate, to becoming a subject, the author of her own final act. She may have lost her kingdom and her life, but in that last terrible trial, she claimed her own soul. That was a summary of Marie Antoinette, The Journey by Antonia Fraser. We've touched on the major currents of this incredible story today, but I have to be honest with you. No summary, no matter how detailed, can truly capture the book's richness. The real power is in the details Fraser uncovers, the private letters, the eyewitness accounts, the small human moments that bring this world to life. This podcast is a map, but the book is the territory. If any part of this journey has spoken to you, if you've felt that pull of curiosity or pang of empathy, I truly encourage you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning history. It's about experiencing a life, and it's an experience that will stay with you long after you've turned the final page. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this summary valuable, and if you enjoy these deep dives into books that have shaped leaders and thinkers, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. It's the best way to support our work and ensure you don't miss our next journey into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep growing together.